Alright, this is a responding to comments video, and what better comment to start with than probably the single comment I have gotten the most amount of times than any other comment, I think, in the entirety of my 5-year YouTube career.
Welcome to my first YouTube video ever. I like to do magic, so I thought my first video should be a magic performance and tutorial.
So many different people put in the comment section of my Giants in the Bible video some variation of Goliath would not be capable of actually fighting and being an effective soldier at that height. And the thing is, I think this is perfectly reasonable, and I actually agree quite a bit. These comments are fantastic because people are thinking through these stories logically instead of just blindly believing. That's great. I think everyone should do the same. Never blindly believe anything, because if you're blindly believing things, that's not faith. That's what's called gullibility. Now, the problem with these comments is not the content of the comments themselves or the thought process behind them, but rather it's what's being assumed in the comments that's the problem. The assumption usually comes from a place of Goliath was a champion, an expert fighter, and Robert Wadlow, the guy that I repeatedly compare Goliath to in the video, had a hard time even walking. So how are these two people comparable? And again, reasonable, right? This makes sense, but it's still an assumption. If we actually go back and read the story of David and Goliath, nowhere in the story is Goliath's speed, his agility, or expert fighting prowess mentioned. Nowhere. Most likely, Goliath wasn't really anything special as far as warrior status goes. He was actually most likely quite under average. He was probably a really big, intimidating guy that people just didn't really want to fight, to be honest. As Sun Tzu famously said in The Art of War, all warfare is based on deception. Hence, when we are able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must appear inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. And when far away, we must make them believe that we are near. I believe this is exactly the purpose that Goliath was for. An appearance of incredible strength, a deterrent, much more than an actual asset. As described in the story, Goliath didn't really move much. He basically walked to the battle line with his shield bearer preceding him. He requested that David come to him, and David did. He ran across the battlefield to meet Goliath. Again, all of this involving almost no movement from Goliath. In his previous battles, which are not described at all in the Bible, so this is pure speculation from my part, I'm just trying to make a point here based on context clues, he most likely barely moved around the battlefield as well. He probably just chilled behind his shield bearer and poked people to death with a giant spear from the distance. Do you think it's a coincidence that David used a stone and sling, a ranged weapon, against Goliath in order to defeat him? I don't think so. If David were to get close to Goliath, his massive wingspan and increased reach from his giant spear would have pierced David like a kebab. So he wisely did not attack with a melee weapon, but rather a ranged weapon. The point of the Giants in the Bible video was to just knock things into perspective, which is why I started the video by shattering the idea of giants being like 50 feet or 15 meters tall, because that is fiction. I wanted to show the fact that these giants we're speaking of were not astronomically tall. That was the point of the video. I also did not make the video for the purpose of explaining these things theologically, which is why I never brought up the fact of the Nephilim, or the half-breeding of angels and humans to create these incredible beings. Because again, that wasn't the point of the video. The point was, and I'm glad that people saw that because this was my first 100k views video ever, so thank you guys very, very much for that. But anyway, the point of the video was to demonstrate the fact that most people's perception of giants in the Bible is extremely off. They were not 30 meters tall, they were like 3 meters tall. So if there was a guy, and there was, with pictures of his staggering 8 foot 11 inch height, or 271 centimeters, is it really that ridiculous to believe that there was also a guy that was just a little bit taller at 297 centimeters? I don't really think so. Alright, with that one out of the way, our next comment is coming from Nicario9499, where he very maturely, actually, and very wisely asked the question, is it sin to watch sin. Like, for example, the TV show Invincible, where it has a lot of sinful aspects, but seems to be a good show. Another example is a YouTube video that could be about something of no sin, but you may hear a curse word from the creator, or a subtle inappropriate joke, or a blatant one. I was a big show and movie watcher, but most has those things in it. Firstly, I love this question. Nicario, thank you so much for asking it. It is actually really great to see people interested in keeping the content they consume from invading their mind in negative ways. That's amazing. Very, very thoughtful. Now, to actually answer the question is a lot more nuanced, because it depends on a lot of things. Things like how old you are, how the seeing and or hearing of these things affect you mentally, spiritually, etc. For example, of course, if you are a child, shows like Invincible may not be very good for you to watch because of graphic violence, a decent amount of swear words, and even a little bit of sexual innuendos or implied sexual content. But if you are a grown man, violence probably isn't much of a problem for you, especially in an animated TV show, and swear words and innuendos probably don't bother you much either. But for some people, things like watching violence, sexual innuendos, and hearing swear words do bother them. A lot of times these things get stuck in their heads and even lead to feelings of guilt because they themselves believe that they are doing something wrong. That, according to the Bible, is the most important factor to answering this question. The Bible has tons of graphic violence in it, so obviously that in and of itself is not sin. Same thing with sexual concepts, as these things are also riddled all throughout the Bible, even in sinful contexts, which of course in the Bible is portrayed as being wrong, and in media it's usually not portrayed as being wrong, but you still get my point. Even swear words are mentioned many different times in the Bible, and if you are more curious about that topic, I have a really old video on my channel, but still has very good information and goes much more in depth on this topic. But even swearing, according to the Bible, is not inherently, in and of itself, sinful. And again, you can watch that old video to learn more. With that being said, all of these things are not inherently sinful in and of themselves according to the Bible, but they can be. The Bible specifies very clearly in Romans chapter 14, verse 14 and 22, "I know and am persuaded in the Lord Jesus that nothing is unclean in itself, but it is unclean for anyone who thinks it unclean. And the faith that you have, keep between yourself and God. Blessed is the one who has no reason to pass judgment on himself for what he approves." These verses clearly express the fact that if the Bible doesn't indicate in any way, and there's a lot of nuance and wisdom to this, but if it doesn't allude to it as being sin, it's not sinful to indulge in it. But it is sinful to indulge in it if you believe it to be sinful. That's the key right there. So, Nicario, and anyone else watching this, if you find yourselves feeling guilty or on the fence about something, you feel like you're doing something wrong when indulging in media that may contain things you feel are sinful, then you definitely should refrain. I think the fact that you are so in tune with your own feelings of holiness and reverence towards God through what you consume shows a lot about your character and disposition towards God. It's incredible, and it shows your deep care for God, your morals, and trying to do what is right. That's great. Nicario, thank you for your question. Thank you for asking it. And moving on to our next comment. This one's coming from Lady Alira, I believe is how you say it, Lady Alira. She writes, "The true Bible is the Sefer Bible. God, Jesus, Lord is all pagan names. Our Father's name is Yahuwah, not God. Our Messiah's name is Yahusha, not Jesus." Now, I just have to say, I appreciate very, very much the thoughtfulness of wanting to use our God's name correctly. That's amazing. But there are still some problems that I see, so I'm going to answer this comment one section at a time just to make things very clear. I am going to be answering the questions themselves, nothing against the person asking the questions. Firstly, the claim that the true Bible is the Sefer Bible is one with many different issues that I will point out. For example, the mistranslation of Hebrew words in the Old Testament, like the word et being translated as divine, when this word absolutely does not mean divine at all. Alright, it's me from the future here. I made a mistake in saying that the word et is translated as divine. That is incorrect on my part. The word in the Sefer is not directly translated as divine, but it is used in that connotation. On the website, they say themselves that the word et is comprised of the letters aleph and tav, the first and last letters of the Hebrew alphabet. They then decide that this was a metaphor for the alpha and omega, the beginning and the end kind of thing, and so attributed the word to being something with divine meaning. A divine meaning worthy enough to make it their official copywritten logo. This too, as with many other things I will get into, is completely arbitrary, and so my point still stands. Let's continue with the explanation of this Hebrew word. The word et doesn't actually mean anything, exactly. It is an emphasis word used to mark a specific, direct, and definite object noun in a sentence. So the word et could be used to mean the, like in the case of she saw the car, as opposed to she saw a car. It's showing specificity. It could also be used to mean this or that when referring to desiring something specific, like I want this car, I want that car, as opposed to I want a car, I want just some car. See what I mean? So the Sefer Bible makes a bad mistranslation there, mainly because the entirety of the translation is not based on the earliest manuscripts like many other translations, ESV, NASB, NIV, etc. Instead, the writers of the Sefer Bible kind of just pick and chose from everywhere, which causes many mistakes. There was no actual scholarly approach to this Bible at all, and the writers don't even like it being called a Bible. They just kind of added books that they deemed to be missing from the Orthodox Bible, again, with no actual basis in it. It was just kind of chosen by them. Then the words and phrases that were translated from all these books of the Bible and the missing ones that they just picked out arbitrarily were not done very scholarly at all, again. So to answer the first part of your question, the Sefer Bible is 100% not the true Bible. It is an arbitrary, thrown together, factually incorrect amalgamation of texts claiming to be true, which again, it is not. Now, to answer the second part of your comment is much easier. Technically, this statement is partially correct, but barely. The Messiah's name during his life, what people would have called him when he was walking around on the street, was not Jesus. That's correct. But it also was not Yahusha. If I were to go into exact graphic detail, it would take way too long, so I'm just going to put it on screen and then just say it. Jesus' name in more Aramaic would be pronounced Yeshu. Jesus' name in more Greek would be pronounced Yeshu. Jesus' name in more Hebrew would be pronounced Yeshua. That's some more accurate pronunciation of Jesus' name in the first century, depending on dialect. Now, as for the Father's name, we actually do not know exactly how to pronounce it. It's never perfectly specified. Instead, the only personal name written about God in the Old Testament is the 4 Hebrew letters Yod, He, Vav, He. You could pronounce these 4 letters many different ways, but the original pronunciation is still unknown. The ancient Jews eventually stopped pronouncing his name because they thought the name too holy to speak out loud, instead referring to God verbally as Adonai. The pronunciation that is being referred to in Lady Alira's comment was a hybrid word created by ancient Jewish scribes to remind people to refer to God verbally as Adonai, which means Lord. How they did this was by taking the 4 consonant letters of Yahweh, which means He will be, and the 3 vowel letters of Adonai, and mashing them together to make a new word, which if you were to pronounce it, it would be something like Yahuwah. But no one actually pronounced it this way because it was not created to be pronounced. As I said, it was a visual reminder to the reader to not say the personal name of God out loud, but instead to say Adonai. Now, to answer the third part of the comment, the word God is not pagan. It's actually the opposite. The earliest form of the word God being used was by Germans in the process of converting people to Christianity away from their pagan religions. It's the opposite of pagan. The word Lord is also not pagan. As we discussed, it is a direct translation of the original Hebrew word Adonai. And finally, Jesus is also not a pagan name. It is a transliteration from the name Yeshua, to the Greek Yeshu, to the Latin Jesus, to the English Jesus. You can trace it right back. There's nothing pagan, it's just different languages pronouncing things slightly differently. That's all. Lady Alira, I appreciate your care for wanting to use proper words to refer to God and to have those words be accurate, as well as you desiring to read the true Word of God. That is all fantastic. But right now, as I've just demonstrated, you have been deceived by someone who is telling you that the words you are reading in the Sefer are accurate and true, and that the words you use to refer to God are also true and accurate. Both of these things, of course, being wrong. I hope these explanations helped, and please continue in your journey for truth. What you are working towards is extremely admirable. With that being said, finally, our last comment for today is coming from Burger-777-S7D. Fantastic name, and thank you for your comment. The question is, could you make a video on lust, please? Thank you. And the answer is, yes, Burger. Yes, I can. That one takes a lot of explanation though, so that will be, as you requested, a full-length video in and of itself that will be coming out next week. So subscribe so you guys don't miss it, and while you are waiting, please check out my previous video that is linked on screen right now. Thank you all for your comments. Please continue leaving them below because I plan on making multiple of these videos, but I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.